The cruel act of a successful baker haunts her for years. 5 years later, on a fateful day, a familiar face walks into her bakery, awakening old regrets. What happens next could change her life forever, teaching her the true values of life. Or would it be too late? Find out how a single moment of kindness can trigger a series of unexpected moments, potentially transforming lives, perhaps forever. This incredible true story will leave you speechless and inspire you to see the world differently. Welcome, enjoy, subscribe, and turn on notifications. The scent of freshly baked bread wafted through the air, a comforting embrace that wrapped around Ella Martinez as she stood behind the counter of her beloved bakery. Ella's bakery, nestled on a busy corner in downtown Metroville, had been her pride and joy for the past decade. At 42, Ella wore her experience like a badge of honor, her dark hair streaked with the occasional silver strand, and laugh lines framing her warm brown eyes. As the morning rush began to subside, Ella found herself lost in thought, her gaze drifting to the large window that looked out onto the bustling street. The neon sign outside flickered to life, casting a soft glow on the passing faces, each one a story, each one a potential customer. "Ella?" Samira's voice broke through her reverie. "The new batch of sourdough is ready. Should I bring it out?" Ella turned to her assistant, a petite woman in her late 20s with a perpetual smile. "Yes, please. And Samira? Make sure to arrange them artfully. Presentation is everything." As Samira nodded and retreated to the kitchen, Ella's attention was drawn to a commotion outside. A group of teenagers had gathered around a colorful mural that adorned the wall of the building across the street. The vibrant artwork depicted a diverse group of hands coming together to form a heart, with the words, "Embrace Compassion," painted in bold letters. Ella felt a twinge in her chest, a feeling she couldn't quite place. Was it admiration for the artwork, or something else? She shook her head, trying to dispel the nagging sensation. The bell above the door chimed, and Detective Ryan Carter strode in, his uniform crisp and his smile warm. "Morning, Ella. The usual, please." "Coming right up, Ryan," Ella replied, reaching for a paper bag. As she filled it with the detective's favorite pastries, she couldn't help but ask, "Have you seen that new mural across the street?" Ryan's eyes lit up. "Ah, yes. It's fantastic, isn't it? I heard it's the work of Marcus Lee. He's become quite the local celebrity with his art." The name sent a jolt through Ella's system. Marcus Lee. The memory of a cold morning 5 years ago flashed through her mind, a disheveled man seeking shelter, her own harsh words, the look of hurt and humiliation on his face as he left the bakery. "Ella? You okay?" Ryan's concerned voice brought her back to the present. She forced a smile. "Yes, just thinking about how much the neighborhood has changed." She handed him the bag, her hand trembling slightly. As Ryan left, Ella found herself drawn back to the window, her eyes fixed on the mural. The hands in the painting seemed to reach out to her, a silent accusation of a past mistake she had tried so hard to forget. Marcus Lee stood back from his latest creation, paintbrush in hand, admiring the way the colors blended on the canvas. His studio, a converted warehouse space filled with the scent of paint and creativity, had become his sanctuary over the past few years. At 38, Marcus carried himself with a quiet dignity that belied his tumultuous past. His dark skin was smooth, save for a few lines around his eyes that hinted at both laughter and hardship. His hands, once calloused from life on the streets, were now stained with various hues, the mark of an artist dedicated to his craft. A knock at the door interrupted his concentration. "Come in," he called out, setting down his brush. Detective Ryan Carter entered, a familiar paper bag in hand. "Thought you might need a pick-me-up," he said, offering the bag to Marcus. "Ella's finest." Marcus hesitated for a moment before accepting the gift. "Thanks, Ryan. You didn't have to." "I know, but your mural's the talk of the town. Figured you deserved a treat." Ryan's eyes roamed the studio, taking in the various works in progress. "You've come a long way, Marcus." A sad smile played on Marcus's lips. "Sometimes I wonder if I've come far enough." Ryan placed a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Hey, you're not that man anymore. You've turned your life around, inspired countless people with your art. That's something to be proud of." Marcus nodded, his gaze drifting to a small sketch pinned to the wall, a rough drawing of a bakery storefront, the word Ella's barely visible. "I suppose you're right. It's just, some memories are harder to shake than others." Speaking of memories, Ryan said, his tone cautious. "There's something I wanted to run by you. The community center is organizing an art exhibition, and they're looking for local artists to showcase their work. I thought you'd be perfect for it." Marcus's eyebrows shot up. "That's unexpected. Where would this be held?" Ryan hesitated for a moment. "Well, various local businesses have offered to host pieces. One of them is Ella's Bakery." The air in the studio seemed to thicken. Marcus turned away, busying himself with cleaning his brushes. "I don't know, Ryan. That's a lot to ask." "I understand," Ryan said softly. "But think about it, okay? This could be a chance to close a chapter, maybe open a new one." As Ryan left, Marcus found himself staring at the sketch of Ella's Bakery. The memory of that cold morning, the sting of rejection, the hunger and hopelessness, it all came flooding back. But alongside it, a new feeling emerged. A desire to prove how far he'd come, to show the world, and maybe himself, that he was more than his past. With a deep breath, Marcus picked up his phone and dialed the number Ryan had left. "Hello? This is Marcus Lee. I'd like to submit my work for the community art exhibition." Ella stood in the middle of her bakery, surveying the space with a critical eye. The warm golden walls seemed to glow in the afternoon light, and the display cases were filled with an array of tempting pastries and breads. Everything was perfect, as always. So why did she feel so unsettled? The answer came in the form of a large blank wall near the entrance. Tomorrow that space would be filled with a piece of art, a mural by Marcus Lee. "Ella?" Samira's voice cut through her thoughts. "The committee just called. They wanted to confirm the time for the mural installation tomorrow." Ella nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, first thing in the morning. We'll open a little later to give them time to set up." Samira hesitated, then asked, "Are you sure you're okay with this? You've seemed off ever since we agreed to host the artwork." For a moment, Ella considered brushing off Samira's concern, but something in her assistant's kind eyes made her pause. "It's complicated," she admitted. "The artist, Marcus Lee. I knew him a long time ago, and I wasn't kind to him." Understanding dawned on Samira's face. "Oh, Ella, is this about that man you told me about? The one you turned away?" Ella nodded, feeling a lump form in her throat. "I've tried to make up for it, you know. The donations to the shelter, the day-old bread we give away. But seeing his name again, knowing he'll be here..." She trailed off, unable to finish the thought. Samira reached out, squeezing Ella's hand. "You're not that person anymore, Ella. You've changed. Maybe this is a chance to show him that..." As if on cue, the bell above the door chimed. Detective Ryan Carter walked in, his expression serious. "Ella, got a minute?" She nodded, leading him to a quiet corner of the bakery. "What's wrong, Ryan?" "Nothing's wrong," he assured her. "I just wanted to give you a heads up. Marcus Lee, he's going to be here for the installation tomorrow." Ella felt her heart skip a beat. "He is? I thought the committee would handle everything." Ryan shook his head. "Marcus insisted on overseeing it himself. Ella, I know there's history there, but this could be a chance for both of you to move forward." As Ryan left, Ella found herself once again staring at the blank wall. Tomorrow, it would be filled with art, a symbol of creativity, of second chances, of the power of transformation. Could it also be a canvas for redemption? With trembling hands, Ella reached for her phone and pulled up a number she'd saved years ago, but never had the courage to call. She took a deep breath and pressed dial. "Hello?" A deep, cautious voice answered. "Marcus, this is Ella Martinez, from the bakery. I think it's time we talked." The early morning light filtered through the windows of Ella's bakery, casting long shadows across the polished floors. Ella stood near the entrance, her hands clasped tightly in front of her, watching as a small team carefully maneuvered a large covered canvas through the door. And there he was, Marcus Lee, directing the installation with quiet authority. He looked different from the man Ella remembered. Gone was the desperation in his eyes, replaced by a calm confidence. His clothes were paint-splattered but clean, and he carried himself with dignity. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world seemed to stand still. Ella felt her heart pounding in her chest as she took a tentative step forward. "Mr. Lee," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Welcome to Ella's Bakery." Marcus nodded, his expression unreadable. "Miss Martinez, thank you for hosting my work." The formality in his tone stung, but Ella pressed on. I'm glad you're here. I was hoping we could talk." Before Marcus could respond, one of the installers called out to him, and he turned away to address a question about the mural's placement. Ella watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and disappointment. Samira appeared at her side, a comforting presence. "Deep breaths, Ella. You've got this." As the installation progressed, Ella busied herself with opening procedures, stealing glances at Marcus whenever she could. She noticed the way he interacted with his team, patient, kind, always ready with a word of encouragement. It was a far cry from the broken man she'd turned away years ago. Finally, as the last of the protective covering was removed from the mural, Ella found herself standing beside Marcus, both of them gazing at the artwork. The mural was stunning, a vibrant depiction of hands of all colors and sizes, reaching out to one another, forming intricate patterns that seemed to pulse with life. At the center, a loaf of bread was being broken and shared. "It's beautiful," Ella murmured, her eyes wide with wonder. Marcus turned to her, his expression softening slightly. "Thank you. I call it breaking bread." Ella felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. "Marcus, I owe you an apology. What I did, how I treated you that day, it was unforgivable." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his gaze returning to the mural. "You know," he said finally, "for a long time I thought about that day, about how it made me feel. Worthless. Invisible." He paused, taking a deep breath. "But then I realized something. That moment, as painful as it was, it became a turning point for me." Ella listened, her heart heavy with remorse and a growing sense of hope. "I decided that day that I would never let anyone make me feel that small again," Marcus continued. "It pushed me to seek help, to rediscover my passion for art. In a way, Miss Martinez, that moment led me here." Ella felt a tear slip down her cheek. "I'm so sorry, Marcus, and I'm so glad you found your way. But please know that I'm not that person anymore. I've tried to be better, to do better." Marcus turned to her, his eyes searching her face. "I believe you," he said softly, "and I think I'm ready to let go of that day, if you are." In that moment, surrounded by the beauty of Marcus's art and the sweet scent of fresh bread, Ella felt something shift inside her. It was as if a weight she'd been carrying for years had finally begun to lift. "I am," she whispered. "Thank you, Marcus." As they stood there, an understanding passing between them, neither noticed Detective Ryan Carter watching from the doorway, a satisfied smile on his face. The news of Marcus Lee's mural at Ella's Bakery spread through downtown Metroville like wildfire. In the days following the installation, the bakery saw a surge of curious visitors, all eager to see the artwork and sample Ella's famous pastries. Ella found herself busier than ever, but there was a new spring in her step. The weight of her past mistake, while not entirely gone, had eased considerably. She caught herself smiling more, laughing with customers, and even humming as she worked in the kitchen. One afternoon, as the rush was winding down, Ella overheard a conversation between two customers admiring the mural. "I heard the artist used to be homeless," one woman whispered. "Can you believe it? And now look at him." Her companion nodded. "It just goes to show, you never know someone's story. We should be kinder to everyone we meet." Ella felt a warmth spread through her chest. She looked at the mural, at the hands reaching out to one another, and felt inspired. An idea began to form in her mind. That evening after closing, Ella called a meeting with her staff. "I have a proposition," she announced, her eyes shining with excitement. "I want to start a new initiative. We'll call it Breaking Bread Together." Samira leaned forward, intrigued. "What do you have in mind, Ella?" "We'll partner with the local shelter," Ella explained. "Once a week we'll host a special dinner here at the bakery. We'll invite people from all walks of life, our regular customers, business owners, and yes, those who are currently struggling with homelessness." There was a moment of silence as her staff absorbed the idea. Then, slowly, smiles began to spread across their faces. "That's brilliant, Ella," Samira exclaimed. "But won't some of our regulars be put off?" Ella straightened her shoulders. Maybe at first, but that's exactly the point. We need to break down these barriers, to see each other as human beings, not labels. And what better way to do that than by breaking bread together? As her staff buzzed with excitement, beginning to brainstorm ideas, Ella felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. She glanced at the mural, silently thanking Marcus for the inspiration. The next day, Ella reached out to Marcus, inviting him to be a part of the initiative. To her delight, he agreed enthusiastically. "I think it's a wonderful idea, Ella," he said, his use of her first name not lost on her. "Art has the power to inspire change, but so does a simple act of sharing a meal. Count me in." The first Breaking Bread Together dinner was a mix of nervous energy and cautious optimism. Ella had transformed the bakery, pushing tables together to create one long communal dining space. The aroma of freshly baked bread and hearty soup filled the air. As guests began to arrive, a mix of regular customers, local business owners, and individuals from the shelter, Ella felt her anxiety rise. What if this was a mistake? What if people couldn't overcome their prejudices? Her worries were interrupted by a gentle touch on her arm. She turned to see Marcus, a reassuring smile on his face. "It's going to be okay, Ella. You're doing a good thing here." His words gave her strength, and she nodded, taking a deep breath before addressing the gathered crowd. "Welcome, everyone," she began, her voice steady despite her nerves. "Thank you for joining us tonight. The idea behind this dinner is simple: to come together, to share a meal, and to remember that despite our differences, we're all part of this community." As the evening progressed, Ella watched in amazement as conversations flowed. Laughter echoed through the bakery, and barriers began to crumble. She saw a well-dressed businessman deep in conversation with a woman who had been living on the streets, their hands gesturing animatedly as they discovered a shared passion for jazz music. At one point, Ella found herself seated next to an elderly man named George, who had been coming to the shelter for years. "You know," George said, his eyes twinkling, "I used to walk by this bakery every day, dreaming of tasting one of your famous cinnamon rolls. Never thought I'd be sitting here, breaking bread with the owner herself." Ella felt tears prick her eyes. "Well, George, you're welcome here any time. And please, take a cinnamon roll for the road." As the night wound down, Ella stood by the door, bidding farewell to her guests. Detective Ryan Carter was one of the last to leave. "You've done something special here, Ella," he said, his voice filled with admiration. This is how we build a stronger community." Ella smiled, feeling a sense of accomplishment she hadn't experienced in years. "Thank you, Ryan. But I couldn't have done it without everyone's support, especially Marcus." As if summoned by his name, Marcus appeared beside them. "This was a wonderful evening, Ella. You should be proud." Ella looked between Ryan and Marcus, feeling a surge of gratitude for these two men who had, in their own ways, helped her on this journey of redemption. "I am proud," she said softly, "and I'm grateful. To both of you." As they stood there, framed by the glow of the bakery's warm lights and the powerful imagery of Marcus's mural, Ella felt a sense of hope for the future, not just for herself, but for her entire community. The Breaking Bread Together dinners were just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, prejudices to overcome, and hearts to change. But as Ella locked up the bakery that night, she knew that they had taken an important first step. In the quiet of the empty bakery, she looked once more at the mural, at the hands reaching out, connecting, sharing. And she smiled, knowing that sometimes, the hardest battles truly do lead to the most beautiful beginnings. As weeks passed, the Breaking Bread Together dinners became a staple in downtown Metroville. Ella's bakery buzzed with a new energy, attracting a diverse crowd that spanned all walks of life. However, not everyone in the community embraced the change with open arms. One crisp autumn morning, Ella arrived at the bakery to find a small group of protesters gathered outside. They held signs with slogans like, "Keep our streets clean," and "Business before charity." At the forefront stood Harold Blackwell, a prominent local businessman known for his conservative views. Ella's heart sank as she approached the door, keys in hand. Harold stepped forward, his face set in a stern frown. "Miss Martinez," he said, his voice carrying a hint of disdain, "we need to talk about this initiative of yours. It's bringing down the neighborhood." Ella took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Mr. Blackwell, I respectfully disagree. Our dinners are bringing people together, fostering understanding. They're attracting vagrants, Harold interrupted. My customers feel uncomfortable. This needs to stop, or you'll be hearing from my lawyers. As Harold and his group dispersed, Ella unlocked the bakery, her hands shaking slightly. Inside, she found Samira already preparing for the day, concern etched on her face. I saw them outside, Samira said softly. Are you okay? Ella nodded, though her eyes betrayed her worry. We knew there might be pushback. We need to stay the course. As they worked, Ella's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. Heard about the protesters. Stay strong. Your work matters. His words buoyed her spirits, but the seed of doubt had been planted. Was she jeopardizing her business? The livelihood of her employees? Later that day, Detective Ryan Carter stopped by, his face grave. Ella, I wanted to give you a heads up. There's talk of a petition going around to shut down your dinners. It's gaining traction with some of the local business owners. Ella felt her stomach drop. What can we do? Ryan sighed. Keep doing what you're doing. You're making a difference. But be prepared for things to get worse before they get better. As Ryan left, Ella found herself staring at Marcus's mural, seeking strength in its vibrant colors and message of unity. She knew the road ahead would be challenging, but she was determined to see it through. The tension in downtown Metroville continued to build over the next few weeks. Ella noticed a decline in her regular customers, and whispers followed her as she walked down the street. But for every disapproving glance, there was a warm smile from someone whose life had been touched by the breaking bread together dinners. One evening, as Ella was preparing for another dinner, she received an unexpected visit from Marcus. His face was etched with concern. Ella, he said, his voice low and urgent. I overheard something at the community center. Harold Blackwell is planning to speak at the town council meeting tomorrow. He's going to try to pass an ordinance that would effectively shut down your dinners. Ella felt as if the floor had dropped out from under her. Can he do that? Marcus shook his head. I don't know, but we can't let him win without a fight. As they discussed strategy, the bakery door burst open. Samira rushed in, her eyes wide with panic. Ella, you need to see this! They followed her outside to find the bakery's windows covered in angry red graffiti. Go back where you came from, was scrawled across the storefront, the paint still wet and dripping. Ella stood frozen, shock and hurt washing over her. Marcus placed a comforting hand on her shoulder. This isn't right, he murmured. We need to do something. As if in answer to his words, people began to gather. Neighbors, regular customers, and even some of the individuals who had attended the dinners arrived, armed with cleaning supplies. An elderly woman Ella recognized from the dinners stepped forward. We're here to help, dear. This hatred has no place in our community. Tears welled in Ella's eyes as she watched the crowd work together to remove the hateful message. In that moment, she realized that while she had set out to change her community, the community had also changed her. As the last of the graffiti was scrubbed away, Ella turned to the gathered crowd. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Tomorrow there's a town council meeting. They're going to try to stop our dinners. I'd be honored if you'd stand with me. The response was a resounding chorus of support. The town hall was packed the next evening. Ella sat in the front row, flanked by Marcus and Samira, with Detective Ryan Carter standing nearby. The air was thick with tension as Harold Blackwell took the podium. Ladies and gentlemen, Harold began, his voice carrying through the room. We are here to discuss a matter of great importance to our community. The recent activities at Ella's Bakery, while well-intentioned, are attracting undesirable elements to our neighborhood. Property values are dropping, and longtime residents no longer feel safe. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Ella felt her heart racing, but she held her ground. Harold continued. I propose an ordinance that would limit gatherings in business establishments after hours, effectively putting an end to these dinners. As he spoke, Ella noticed movement at the back of the hall. More people were filing in, faces she recognized from the dinners, from the shelter, from the streets. They stood silently, a living testament to the lives touched by her initiative. When Harold finished, the council chair asked if anyone else wished to speak. Ella stood, her legs shaky, but her resolve firm. As she made her way to the podium, she felt the weight of every eye in the room. Good evening, she began, her voice steadier than she felt. My name is Ella Martinez. 5 years ago, I made a mistake. I turned away a man in need, someone who only wanted shelter and a bit of kindness. That man was Marcus Lee. She gestured to Marcus, who stood, a small smile on his face. My actions that day haunted me, Ella continued. But they also inspired me to do better, to be better. The Breaking Bread Together dinners aren't just about feeding people. They're about nourishing our community, about seeing the humanity in each other. Ella's voice grew stronger as she spoke. Mr. Blackwell speaks of property values and safety, but I ask you, what is the value of a community that turns its back on those in need? How safe are we if we're isolated from our neighbors, afraid of those who are different from us? She looked out at the crowd, meeting the eyes of those she'd come to know through the dinners. These gatherings have brought people together who might never have met otherwise. They've led to job opportunities, to friendships, to a stronger, more connected community. Ella took a deep breath. I understand the fears and concerns. Change can be scary. But I invite each of you to attend one of our dinners. See for yourself the good that can come when we open our hearts and our doors to one another. As Ella finished speaking, the room erupted in applause. People stood, sharing their own stories of how the dinners had impacted their lives. Even some of Harold's supporters seemed moved. When the council finally called for a vote, the proposed ordinance was overwhelmingly rejected. Instead, a motion was passed to explore ways to support and expand programs like Breaking Bread Together throughout the city. As the meeting adjourned, Ella found herself surrounded by well-wishers. Marcus approached, his eyes shining with pride. You did it, Ella. You really did it. Ella smiled, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. We did it, she corrected him. All of us. Together. As they left the town hall, stepping out into the cool evening air, Ella looked up at the stars twinkling above. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from a moment of cruelty to a movement of kindness. And she knew, with certainty, that this was just the beginning. In the weeks following the town council meeting, Ella's Bakery became a symbol of community and change in downtown Metroville. The Breaking Bread Together dinners continued to grow, attracting people from all walks of life. Even some of Harold Blackwell's former supporters began to attend, curiosity overcoming their initial skepticism. One crisp autumn evening, as Ella was preparing for the weekly dinner, she received an unexpected visitor. Harold Blackwell himself stood at the bakery's entrance, looking uncomfortable but determined. Miss Martinez, he said, his voice gruff but not unkind. I wonder if I might have a word with you. Ella nodded, gesturing for him to enter. Of course, Mr. Blackwell. What can I do for you? Harold cleared his throat. I've been doing some thinking since the council meeting, and I've realized that perhaps I was hasty in my judgment. Ella listened, her heart racing with a mix of hope and caution. My granddaughter, Harold continued. She volunteers at the shelter downtown. She's been telling me about the people she's met, their stories. It's made me see things differently. He paused, meeting Ella's eyes. I'd like to attend one of your dinners, if the invitation is still open. Ella felt a wave of emotion wash over her. Mr. Blackwell, you are absolutely welcome. In fact, why don't you join us tonight? That evening, as Ella watched Harold Blackwell engage in conversation with a young artist who had recently been homeless, she couldn't help but marvel at the power of human connection. Samira sidled up to her, a knowing smile on her face. You know, Ella, I think you've started something bigger than just dinners. Ella nodded, her eyes scanning the room filled with laughter and conversation. I think you're right, Samira. I think you're right. As winter settled over downtown Metroville, Ella found herself busier than ever. The success of the Breaking Bread Together dinners had inspired her to expand her efforts. With the help of Marcus, Samira, and a growing network of volunteers, she launched a job training program at the bakery. The idea is simple, Ella explained to a group of eager participants one morning. We'll teach you the basics of baking, customer service, and business management. By the time you complete the program, you'll have the skills to work in any bakery or cafe in the city. Marcus, who had become a regular fixture at the bakery, added, and for those interested in other fields, we'll be partnering with local businesses to offer a variety of apprenticeships. The program quickly gained traction, with participants ranging from former homeless individuals to struggling single parents looking for a fresh start. One day, as Ella was demonstrating how to knead dough, she noticed a young woman named Tasha struggling with the technique. Tasha had been living on the streets for months before joining the program. "Here," Ella said gently, moving to Tasha's side. "Let me show you a trick my grandmother taught me." As they worked the dough together, Tasha's movements became more confident. "I never thought I'd be doing something like this," she admitted softly. "Thank you, Miss Martinez, for everything." Ella felt a lump form in her throat. "You're doing all the hard work, Tasha. I'm just providing the opportunity." Later that evening, as Ella was closing up the bakery, she found Marcus waiting for her outside. "I heard about what you did with Tasha today," he said, a warm smile on his face. "You're changing lives, Ella. One person at a time." Ella felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "We're changing lives, Marcus. I couldn't do any of this without you." As they walked together in the cool evening air, Ella realized how much her life had changed in just a few short months. The weight of her past mistake had been transformed into a driving force for good. Spring arrived in downtown Metroville, bringing with it a sense of renewal and hope. Ella's job training program had just graduated its first class, and to celebrate, she decided to host a special Breaking Bread Together dinner. The bakery was transformed for the occasion. Tables spilled out onto the sidewalk, covered in crisp white cloths and centerpieces of fresh spring flowers. The graduates, wearing chef's hats and aprons emblazoned with Ella's Bakery, bustled about, proudly serving dishes they had prepared themselves. As guests began to arrive, Ella felt a sense of awe at how far they had come. She saw Harold Blackwell chatting amiably with a group of former homeless individuals. Detective Ryan Carter was there, beaming with pride as he sampled the graduates' creations. And at the center of it all was Marcus, his eyes shining as he took in the scene. Midway through the evening, Ella clinked her glass for attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd. "To second chances, to new beginnings, and to the power of community." A chorus of "hear, hear" echoed through the gathering. "When I started these dinners," Ella continued, "I thought I was offering a second chance to others. What I didn't realize was that I was also giving myself a second chance. A chance to right a wrong, to be the person I always wanted to be." She paused, her eyes finding Marcus in the crowd. "And I couldn't have done it without all of you. Especially you, Marcus. Your forgiveness, your support. It's meant everything." As applause filled the air, Ella saw tears in Marcus's eyes that mirrored her own. The evening continued, filled with laughter, stories, and the unmistakable sense of a community united. As the last of the guests departed, Ella found herself alone with Marcus in the bakery. "You know," Marcus said softly, "that day 5 years ago, when you turned me away, I never could have imagined it would lead to this." Ella nodded, feeling a mix of emotions wash over her. "I'm so sorry for what I did that day, Marcus, but I'm grateful for where it's brought us." Marcus reached out, taking her hand in his. "Ella, you've created something beautiful here. You've given so many people hope, a fresh start, including me." As they stood there, surrounded by the remnants of the celebration, Ella felt a sense of peace settle over her. She realized that in trying to make amends, she had found her true purpose, and in Marcus, she had found not just forgiveness, but a partner in her journey to make the world a little bit better, one loaf of bread at a time. "So," Ella said, a smile playing on her lips, "what do you think our next project should be?" Marcus laughed, his eyes twinkling. "With you, Ella, I think the possibilities are endless." As they began to clean up, discussing ideas for the future, Ella knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter, not just for her and Marcus, but for the entire community of downtown Metroville. And she couldn't wait to see what the next page would bring. As summer approached, the impact of Ella's initiatives began to spread beyond downtown Metroville. News outlets picked up the story of the bakery that was changing lives, and soon, Ella found herself fielding calls from other cities interested in replicating her programs. One sunny morning, as Ella was experimenting with a new bread recipe, Marcus burst into the bakery, his face alight with excitement. "Ella, you won't believe this," he exclaimed, waving a letter in his hand. "Remember that grant application we submitted for expanding the job training program?" Ella nodded, her heart beginning to race. "Did we get it?" Marcus's grin widened. "We didn't just get it. They want to use our program as a model for a nationwide initiative. They're offering full funding for 5 years, with the possibility of renewal." Ella felt her knees go weak. She steadied herself against the counter, her mind reeling with the possibilities. "Marcus, do you know what this means? We could help so many more people." As they celebrated, Samira joined them, adding her own news to the mix. "The mayor's office just called. They want to partner with us to create a citywide food security program. Ella, they're calling it the Breaking Bread Initiative." Overwhelmed with emotion, Ella looked around her bakery, at the walls that had witnessed so much change, at the people who had become like family. She realized that what had started as a simple act of atonement had grown into something far greater than she could have ever imagined. The next few months were a whirlwind of activity. Ella, Marcus, and their team worked tirelessly to expand their programs, collaborating with city officials, local businesses, and community leaders. The Breaking Bread initiative took shape, encompassing not just food security, but also job training, affordable housing support, and mental health services. Ella's bakery became the heart of this movement, a symbol of what was possible when a community came together. On a warm September evening, exactly 1 year after the first Breaking Bread Together dinner, Ella hosted a special celebration. The entire block was closed off for the occasion, with tables stretching as far as the eye could see. As Ella stood on a small stage, preparing to address the gathered crowd, she felt a sense of awe at the sea of faces before her. There were people from all walks of life, business owners and former homeless individuals, politicians and artists, young and old. "A year ago," Ella began, her voice carrying over the hushed audience, "I stood in this very spot, uncertain of what the future held. I knew only that I wanted to make amends, to do something good for our community." She paused, her eyes scanning the crowd, finding familiar faces. Samira, Detective Ryan, Harold Blackwell, and of course, Marcus. What I didn't realize then was that in trying to change our community, I would be changed as well. Each of you has taught me something about resilience, about forgiveness, about the power of second chances. Ella's voice grew stronger as she continued. "Today, as we celebrate how far we've come, let us also look to the future. The Breaking Bread initiative is just the beginning. Together, we can create a world where everyone has a place at the table, where no one goes hungry, for food or for human connection." As applause erupted, Ella felt Marcus's hand slip into hers. She turned to him, seeing in his eyes the same hope and determination she felt in her heart. "Ready for the next chapter?" he asked softly. Ella squeezed his hand, a smile spreading across her face. "With you by my side, always." 5 years passed, and downtown Metroville had transformed. The Breaking Bread initiative had become a national model, with cities across the country implementing similar programs. Ella's bakery had expanded, with several locations now spread throughout the city, each serving as a community hub and training center. On a crisp autumn morning, much like the one when our story began, Ella stood in the original bakery. The place had changed. The walls were now adorned with photos documenting their journey, awards recognizing their impact, and always, Marcus's mural holding pride of place. As she kneaded dough for the day's bread, Ella reflected on the path that had led her here. The mistake that had once weighed so heavily on her conscience had become the catalyst for a movement of compassion and change. The bell above the door chimed, and Marcus walked in, a newspaper tucked under his arm. "Have you seen this?" he asked, unfolding the paper to reveal a headline. "Breaking Bread Initiative receives presidential honor." Ella shook her head in amazement. "Sometimes I still can't believe how far we've come." Marcus smiled, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Believe it. You did this, Ella. Your courage, your compassion, it started a ripple that became a wave." As they stood there, surrounded by the warm aroma of baking bread, Ella knew that their work was far from over. There would always be more people to help, more lives to touch. But she also knew that they had created something enduring, a legacy of kindness, second chances, and the simple power of breaking bread together. The bakery began to fill with the day's first customers, some new faces, some old friends. Ella and Marcus exchanged a look of quiet understanding before moving to greet them, ready to continue writing their story, one loaf at a time. And so, as Ella handed a warm loaf to a smiling customer, she realized that in seeking redemption, she had found something far greater: a purpose, a community, and a love that would nourish her soul for years to come. I really hope you enjoyed the story. Please leave a comment with your views. I'm sure there will be new videos on this channel that will thrill you. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, give it a like, and activate the notification bell so you don't miss our next videos. Until next time.